Palestinian journalist Hossam Shabat was deliberately targeted and assassinated yesterday in northern Gaza. Sharif Abdel Qaddous was his editor at DropSite News. He joins us now to talk about Hossam's life and his death. Sharif, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So can you talk a little bit about who Hossam was?
Yeah, Hossam was a young journalist, 23 years old, who grew up in Beit Hanun, which is on the northeastern edge of Gaza. He was a correspondent for Al Jazeera Mubashir, and he quickly became the face on television for millions of people around the Arab world because he was one of the few journalists in Gaza who remained in the north throughout the 17 months of Israel's genocidal assault. He received many threats along with his colleagues, especially another Al Jazeera correspondent, Anas Sharif, directly from the Israeli military, telling them that they had to displace to the south because in the north was where, at certain periods, where Israel really concentrated its extermination campaign, especially in October of last year, in the north of Gaza. And it was only people like Hossam, Anas Sharif, and other journalists that we really understood what was happening on the ground. And throughout these 17 months, Hossam, he witnessed the unimaginable. Death and suffering almost every single day. He was displaced over 20 times. He said that he, couldn't sleep. He was exhausted. He was often very hungry as Israel imposed forced starvation, especially in the north. And he buried many of his colleagues and his friends over this period. And despite that, he was determined to continue to cover the genocide of his own people and would file reports almost every single day. He was very active on social media as well. And in October, he was put on a list of 6 journalists, all in the north, all working for Al Jazeera, not all of them working for Al Jazeera, but 6 journalists. The Israeli military deemed them as militants and put out a list, and it was essentially a hit list. And we saw the spokesperson for the Israeli military, spokesperson in Arabic, his name is Avishai Adrai, posting videos of himself speaking, calling out Hossam, calling out Anas Sharif by name, and basically saying that, you terrorists, we're going to get you. And this was in October, and Hossam is the first of the 6 to be killed. He was bombed while driving in his car in Beit Lahia. Just an hour earlier, Israel had killed another journalist, Mohammed Mansour of Palestine Today. Hossam's last social media post was about Mohammed, saying that another journalist had been martyred, and then he was killed. And it's a very tragic loss, and his voice will be missed. And Hossam, he wrote a letter to be published in the event of his death. He knew he was going to probably be killed, and it opens with him saying, "If you're reading this, I've been killed, most probably by the Israeli occupation forces." And his colleagues and friends published that letter yesterday.
Do you have any favorite memories or stories that stand out just from editing him over the course of this impossible duty that he felt he had to cover the war?
I mean, he was a very warm and kind person. When I asked him his age at one point, I think for the second article I was editing and I was writing a preamble for him, he wrote, I'm 24. And then he said, actually, I haven't even turned 24. I'm 23. I'm really young, right? And I told him, you're young in age, but in experience, you have a lot of experience. And, but then he said, I'm so tired, but I'm going to keep doing this. But, like our last interaction, which was a few hours before he was killed, he reached out to me and he said, Habibi, I miss you. I checked in on him. How are you doing in Jabalia? He said, things are tough. He filed his piece. And then he asked me, when is it going to come out? So I said, Hossam, I still need to translate it. We need to edit it. I'll get it out for you tomorrow morning. This was Sunday night, New York time, which would have been like 5 a.m. his time. So he said, I want to get it out urgently. I'm going to can I publish it in Arabic? I said, okay, Hossam, if you want to publish parts of it in Arabic, that's fine, but leave us something for DropSite that's extra. And then he was like, I'm joking. I'll give it all to you. So that was kind of his, his attitude. But he also was like very, very determined he did want to have his writing out. He was very enthusiastic about reporting for DropSite, for having another outlet, for working in print, for having his work translated. And it was my honor to be a part of that. And yeah, he was killed hours later. And it was very, very shocking because I was just in touch with him. And, I woke up and I sent some more follow-up questions for the piece. And what haunts me is, I think, was that message that I was sending, was his phone going off in his pocket as he was lying on the floor, dead or dying. These things haunt me. But, I try to remember his work and his dedication and his contribution to the Palestinian cause.
You've talked about how in December, I think it was in December, where he was talking about hitting his limit almost, talking about how much he hated what he was doing and just banging his head against the wall and screaming into a void to a world that isn't listening. At the same time, like, his final letter to the world is, don't give up. And to his dying day, he was continuing to fight, continuing to write, continuing to report. And I was also thinking about how Israel's decision to kill him, to assassinate him, in some ways undercuts the idea that what he was doing wasn't having an effect. Like, why would one of the most powerful militaries in the world feel the need to assassinate an unarmed journalist if the words he was writing and what he was sharing on social media actually didn't have any effect? So even though, as we sit here, we see things getting worse and worse and worse, and let's talk in a moment about the conditions on the ground there, at least from the perspective of the Israelis, that journalism, it does still remain to be a threat. How do you answer these questions as you go through a life that sometimes seems pointless, but clearly can't be if it's such a threat?
Yeah, I mean, those comments in December, obviously, like anyone, he would swing between determination and despair. When I messaged him in December to check in on him, it was after 5 journalists were killed in a single airstrike on their vehicle. I think it was Christmas Day. So I just checked in on him, and he said, I hate this world. No one is doing anything. Our job is only to die. When I speak with my colleagues now, we just speak about whose turn is it next. So I think there was deep frustration at the silence of the world, and we can talk about the silence of Western media institutions about people like Hossam and the more than 200 journalists who have been killed. There isn't the level of outrage that there should be, and people like Hossam would still be alive if there was. I truly do believe that. But Hossam was effective. He was covering things where no one was. There was the first piece he filed for us was this searing account of the forced displacement of Bet Lahia during was essentially an extermination campaign in the very north of Gaza in October, November of last year. And he was one of the very few people that was there, seeing people coming out. He wasn't physically there because I don't think anyone could survive, but he was right on the outskirts, seeing people come out, and he filed, this story. And so, the Israeli military very explicitly did not want journalists there. They kept telling them, threatening them, go to the south, stop, don't report from here. And then eventually put them on this list. And then yesterday, the IDF's official Twitter account celebrates the killing of Hossam, says he was not a journalist, he was a terrorist. Don't let the press vest fool you. And then Avichai Adrai, that despicable spokesperson in Arabic for the Israeli military, is celebrating his killing. He's put out a video of himself speaking, saying again, Hossam wasn't a journalist, he was a terrorist. Once again, posting these documents. They said that they discovered showing Hossam was actually a militant in the Beit Hanun battalion of Hamas. This is the same military and the same guy who, have justified the killing of doctors, of UN workers, of children. They often release these documents purporting to show that they have proof that these journalists are not journalists. In July of last year, the Israeli military killed Al Jazeera journalist Ismail Al-Ghul, who was actually a very, very close friend of Hossam's, decapitated him in the airstrike. It also killed his cameraman, Rami Al-Rifi. Then the Israeli military released a document. It said it supported claims that Ismail received a military ranking from Hamas in 2007, when he was 10 years old. This is how ridiculous their alleged claims are. And it's shameful that both the United States and Western media institutions have not spoken out against the killing of over 200 journalists. We knew very, very early on that Israel was doing something different in targeting the press this time. In the first 10 weeks of the war, more journalists were killed in Gaza than had been killed in any country over an entire year, according to CPJ. So we knew that there was something different happening here, and there was not the outrage that by legacy media institutions in this country around this. And this allows for this killing to continue. And it's not only continuing, it's getting worse. Before, they would deny they killed the journalist or say it was collateral damage, that they were trying to get a Hamas militant and the journalist was unfortunate consequence of the bombing. Or they would kill the journalist and then, like Ismail Al-Ghul, say afterwards that they were a militant. And now they're openly just hunting them, saying, oh, these ones are journalists and these ones are not journalists and we're going to kill them.
Yeah,
so this has been allowed to happen.
And with the flimsiest of evidence, one of the documents that you referenced claims that he took part in some battalion training in 2019 when he would have been 16 or 17 years old, which even in a fantasy land where we just completely accept every document that they put forward, even if it were true that there was some high school training program, nobody would argue that Barak Ravid or any other Israeli journalists who served time in the reserves years earlier should be killed while on camera. And the other point on the question of whether or not he was a journalist, he has been doing journalism every day since October 7th and before, but since then. And so every single day we have the evidence of what he is doing because he is doing it publicly. Live streaming and when possible, posting to social media, writing pieces. At what point did he manage to create this secret life? Of course, when you start to think about it, it all completely crumbles. And the hope among the propagandists is that nobody will think about it. Because you're like, you wouldn't be a terrorist and then just be on television all day. That would be a completely...
And I think also what's more saddening in a way is that no one's even paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not being discussed whether he was a journalist or a terrorist or a militant and whether the Israeli claims are true or not. Right. It's just he's killed and it's just normal. It's normal state of affairs. The way it's been normalized that Israel, as it did a few days ago, can bomb a hospital, the biggest hospital. That's just become normal. Mm-hmm. That the way they can kill over 200 children in a matter of hours. And it isn't, this massive outrage around the world. These things have become normalized. And it's allowing the killing to continue.
And for the audience who doesn't know, Sharif played a lead role in a documentary about the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh. Mm. And it's painful to think that things were better then when Israel was at least starting out by denying their role. Mm. And the world cared. The world wanted to find out what happened. Now they're forecasting what they're going to do, doing it, and nobody cares.
Well, Sharif, we can roll this clip. It's a voiceover clip of Hossam's mother. People who are watching this can see it on the screen. But I imagine, even as it feels as though people in the United States are sort of tuned out and maybe numb at best, this in Gaza, this is playing out very differently. I imagine the reaction on the ground with people that you guys have talked to, your sources, is mourning and not shock, because Hossam himself seemed to expect that this would happen at some point. But I'm sure it's hit people very hard.
No, absolutely. Hossam told me at one point, he said, I haven't seen my family for well over a year because they all displaced to the south. He was in January or early February, he was reunited with his mother for the first time in 492 days. He hadn't seen her. There's a very moving video of them hugging. Excuse me. Yeah, he has several siblings. After a few hours after his death, I got a notification on my phone from his WhatsApp, which was very shocking because that's the way I communicate with him. And I was just trying to process that he died, and I got a message saying, God have mercy on him. And I wrote back, God have mercy on him. Who's this? And he said, it's his brother, Wissam. And I sent him a long voice note saying how much Hossam meant to DropSite News and to me, and how important his work was. And, the brother was very appreciative of that. But no, Hossam was, as many of these journalists are, they're kind of heroes in Gaza. At the beginning of the so-called ceasefire in January, when the actual bombs stopped raining down and there was some kind of reprieve, many of them were hoisted onto the shoulders of people. There's video of Hossam being hoisted onto the shoulders of just people in the north celebrating him and his work. And we saw scenes of his funeral yesterday, being carried and with his press vest on him to honor his work. So yeah, it's I'm beside myself about it, and angry as well.
And since March 2nd, which predates the complete collapse of the ceasefire, the destruction of the ceasefire by Israel, Israel had reinstituted the complete siege, and nothing has been able to get in to Gaza since March 2nd. There were protests. We can roll a little bit of that clip there yesterday, which Western media was seizing on some expressions of anti-Hamas sentiment at some of these protests. There may be some more scheduled today. You hear a lot of people saying end the siege and end the war. The signs talking about the ending the occupation. What are you understanding are conditions now 3 weeks into the complete shutoff of supplies getting into nearly 2 million people?
I mean, this is reimposed forced starvation again. As you know, one of our own contributors, Abu Bakr Abed, is suffering from malnutrition now. He's 22 years old. He messaged me the other day. His body's aching. He's in deep pain. He's exhausted. He can't get out of bed really well. He needs galvanized multivitamins and other things. Speaking to doctors that we know, some American doctors and Palestinian doctors who are on the ground there, seeing if we can get him anything, and they hardly have any supplies. 2 doctors, American doctors, yesterday said, who work at Nasser Hospital and were there when it was bombed by the Israelis a few days ago, said that the hospital is going to last another week, and without any more supplies, that they just really can't function. So it's on top of an very much escalated bombing campaign. The Ministry of Health this morning put out statistics on just since last Tuesday, when this re-escalation of the aerial bombardment began. There's 830 people have been killed already, and among them is over 320 children have been killed. So there's bombing happening, there's a complete siege. There's also forced evacuation or forced displacement orders happening all around. They happened first in Beit Hanun, where Hossam was originally from. They're happening in Beit Lahia, in parts of eastern Khan Yunis. Today, there was displacement orders for parts of Gaza City. And I think something like UNRWA said over the past week, 130,000 Palestinians have been redisplaced already. Mm-hmm. This seems like it's laying the groundwork for another massive ground incursion by Israeli ground troops. So the situation's terrible, and there's also some sort of fatigue of people. I just don't feel the same kind of outrage of people here in this country around what's happening. There's a lot that they're dealing with Trump and Musk and people being deported, but I feel like the Israelis seem to have a green light now. They did their few weeks of a so-called ceasefire, and now they're just going to come in and finish off what they haven't. So it's very terrifying.
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine, for example, the 5 other journalists that were put on that hit list, what they must be feeling after Hossam was killed and they're celebrating his death. Can you imagine what it must be like?
Right, especially with drones, drones constantly flying over top, knowing that the people who operate those drones have promised that they're going to kill you. Like, what must it be like to drive around, walk around, not just for yourself? Hossam's best friend was killed alongside him. You probably feel some radioactivity around others. You go to visit your family. You wonder if you're putting your family at risk just by existing.
I was in touch with another DropSite contributor yesterday, Rasha Abu Jalal, who is in Gaza City. She went back there after the ceasefire. She almost died last week when the Israelis bombed the house right next to her, bombed her neighbors, and the wall collapsed on the room where she usually sleeps with her husband and 5 children, but they were in another room because it was warmer, so they miraculously survived. She's saying that all these people who are being displaced, they're mostly coming to that area of Gaza City that she's in, and there's literally no shelter. So there's just rubble. They don't even have tents or makeshift tarps. They're just literally like on the rubble. She said people are starving to the degree that she saw a family go out to the beach and they caught a turtle and ate it. So, it's just almost kind of unimaginable what's happening. And it's just escalating and escalating. And the world is just watching as it's happening.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Sharif, thank you so much for joining us. Deeply appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.